We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Becca Kwan, a program manager at the Metropolitan New York Library Council, also known as Metro. Welcome to the final event in the Built to Last series, co-hosted by Metro, the Benton Institute for Broadband and Society, and the Centri Foundation. As you come in and get settled, I want to say a huge thanks to all of the speakers and attendees who joined us earlier this week for the first two events in this series. I have learned so much from the conversations, and I'm thrilled we get to have one more today. I'll share a few logistical notes as we kick things off. First, as with the events earlier in this week, the session is being recorded and everyone who registered will receive the link to the recording via email. Second, please feel free to introduce yourself and hang out with other attendees in the chat. We'd love to hear where you're from and what you do as we get started. Third, if you have questions for the speakers, we ask that you drop them into the Q&A box as we go. We'll have a few minutes for the speakers to respond to your questions after their discussion. And lastly, we've had two changes to our speaker lineup since this event was announced, so we want to update you on those. Matthew Rantanen, who was originally slated to join us on Tuesday, is going to be here with us today. We're really excited that he could join this panel discussion. And unfortunately, Dr. Fallon Wilson is sick this week and unable to make it, so we're sending her all the get well vibes, and we're excited to welcome her colleague Pamela Price to give our keynote. You can find the links to everyone's bios and to our event code of conduct in the chat. Now, I'm pleased to introduce Revati Prasad, Vice President of Programs at the Benton Institute for Broadband and Society, who will give a brief welcome and intro to today's session.
Thanks so much, Becca, and thank you for all your work in making the series Built to Last, Leveraging Federal Investments for Digital Equity, not just a reality, but just so smooth and enriching for all of us. And thank you everyone for coming to our last and final day for the series. Our today's topic, Embracing the Future, Sustainable Solutions for Digital Equity. Like Becca said, I'm Revati Prasad, the VP of Programs at the Benton Institute for Broadband and Society. Working with the Digital Equity Research Center and the Centri Foundation on the series and listening to the discussions from the last couple of days has been really inspiring and energizing. Our goal with the series has been to bring together to collectively discuss how we can best leverage this broadband moment, this incredible investment and attention to build sustainable, resilient, and crucially equitable broadband. We hope the previous two conversations have helped all of you in the digital equity community look back for the lessons learned, look around for some promising strategies currently being deployed, and today we want to explicitly look forward. The future is vast and unknowable, but so many of us are working on frameworks and tools to structure and strategize our work. At Benton, we worked with actually a couple of the panelists today to develop the visions of digital equity. Through that work, we offer a set of principles to flesh out sort of what we're working towards, what we mean by digital equity, both in process and in terms of goals. I think of Centri Foundation's digital advancement principles and the Research Center's digital equity ecosystems measurement framework as complementary ways of defining our North Star and charting our way to it. I hope that our panel discussion today will help us think about a path forward that is clear, comprehensive, and measurable. But before that, I have the pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker for today. Pamela Price is here with us today. Pamela is a Black Churches for Digital Equity Fellow. She serves as the Deputy Director for the Balm in Gilead, managing the various faith and community-based initiatives of the organization. She's also the Chief Technical Officer for Women in Reality Film and President of the From the Bottom Up Foundation based in Atlanta. Mrs. Price has 20 years of experience working with national and government agencies to develop and implement multifaceted programs to meet the societal and cultural needs of women and underserved communities. I am very excited to introduce her today and hear about the passion that she brings to this work as a woman, as a parent, and as a member of our community. Pamela?
Thank you so much for that amazing introduction and for the opportunity to join and be with you all today. as you shared, this is work that I'm extremely passionate about. I often come into conversations and spaces around the digital equity space, or really just any kind of equity space. And I always like to do a level set so that we can hopefully continue our dialogue from a place of understanding our whys, from a place of understanding the journeys and paths that have led many of us to be in the spaces that we are in today. A part of that journey is actually my younger self. I have always been a lover of technology and of computers. And this little girl that you see on this screen is kindergarten version of me. And again, at that time in my life, growing up in West Texas, I lived and grew up all of my life in low income areas. And having access to typewriters. And I know that's taking some of us way back, but typewriters used to be in our schools. Computer programs used to be abundant, at least in the schools that I was fortunate enough to attend and participate. And so I often, in this conversation around digital equity, I think about the little girls now who are growing up in rural areas, and even some who are growing up perhaps in urban areas, who either they no longer have access to those types of programs that sparked my interest in technology and made me want to understand how computers work and what we could do with them, and how they really could connect, especially for girls like me who lived in red brick villages. You know, computers and technology I saw as an avenue to expose me to a world that I would not have otherwise had an opportunity to connect to. And so as we think about the theme for this series, where we're talking about things that are built to last, right? We have to consider not only what we are trying to build, but understanding what are the tools and resources that's required to build this future, where we have closed this digital divide that we've continued to talk about, that we now have such amazing federal investments, and we have a lot of lenses, a lot of eyeballs, a lot of things being directed into this space, but really thinking about what are the tools that our communities need. Because I think as we are taking advantage of the investments that we've seen from our federal entities and other national partners, it's also making sure that our communities are equipped, that they have the infrastructure, that they have the ecosystems that they need to really be able to maximize the resources that are being leveraged right now from our federal partners. We know that especially in rural and predominantly minority communities, that upwards of 70% of those households do not have access to broadband. We know that there are also near 70+% of those same households who actually don't have the devices that they need. And I think that's important because sometimes in the narratives around this digital equity conversation, they point to, well, 97% of the population has a smartphone. And as amazing as our smartphones are, we can still only do so much with those devices in order to gain the digital skills that we need so that we can fully engage in commerce, that we can fully engage in entrepreneurship, that we can fully engage in education, and all of these different levels of society that allow us to have full quality lives, requires us to be able to have equitable access, equitable utilization to digital technologies. And that is something that we have to make sure that as we are building out these ecosystems and we're building out this framework for the future to close this divide, that we're thinking about those little young girls like myself, that we're thinking about these communities and how are we, one, going to make them better aware of the programs that are being leveraged at our federal level. I'm proud of the work that I've been able to be a part of with the Black Churches for Digital Equity, where we've, for the past 2 years now, have actually supported communities getting enrolled into programs like the Affordable Connectivity program. But then we didn't want to stop there, because it's once we have the access, we also have to make sure that we don't leave out the other components, such as if you have your broadband and we can get you access to the devices that you need, then we also now have to make sure that you can utilize those. Because what we've also found in some of our work with these communities is that 50% or more of these household or individuals actually don't feel or report that they don't have the skills that they need to actually be able to get good or higher paying jobs. And those are things that we have to make sure that are a part of what we build when we are looking to address digital equity, that we're not just stopping at access, that we're also saying, do we have the training? How do we work and partner with our schools, especially those in more under-resourced areas, to make sure that these investments are actually getting into the schools, so that we can have more technology programs that look at how do we how do we get more kids interested in coding? How do we look and engage in this whole conversation around AI, which is extremely fascinating, but we will leave communities behind if we are not more mindful, again, of how we are building and embracing a digital and technological future that is going to include and be equitable for everyone. And so the Balm and Gilead, as a faith-based organization, we often hearken to, you know, what does scripture say about this? And we really do believe that there is an intersection where people's faith, where our beliefs, right, that drive so much of who we are, and also how we show up and how we do and behave in the world around us. And there's a scripture that says that it really asks us, what do we do for the least among us, right? And to paraphrase that. And so as we are building these ecosystems, as we're building out this new digital space and these new digital environments, hopefully with our communities centered and anchored in those infrastructures, we need to be thinking about, what do I do for the least among us? What do we do for the 85-year-old grandmother who wants to be able to connect with her grandchildren who live in another state? What do we do for, again, the 6-year-old kindergartner who has not been introduced to computers, but has always dreamed of what it would be like to have a computer and to get connected to a world outside of what he or she has grown up to be? And if we can build with those who don't have the access, who don't have the literacy levels, who don't have the appropriate devices to stay connected in a real way to the environment and the world around them, then as we build, we will be less likely of excluding those who up to this point have not been connected in these conversations around digital equity. We oftentimes get so far ahead in our building of programs and interventions and initiatives that we do not have or make space at our tables for our community voices, so that they can explain to us and they can share with us how they would like education to occur, how they would plan to use access to broadband. What are their thoughts on how broadband should be brought into their communities? And who should be those key influencers? Who should be some of those decision makers at the table who, again, that can now start to thread that needle, that once we've improved and we've increased and created the access, that we now have trusted individuals in our community who can work hand in hand with local churches, work hand in hand with schools and other local government officials to make sure that as these really generational investments that we're seeing from our federal partners are being doled out and being, sent out into our states and sent out into some of our local communities and organizations. We want to make sure that we don't, again, run the risk of having voices that should be at the table not be at the table. We don't want to look back 10 years from now when this money or funding has potentially gone away and we still are looking and addressing the same inequities and the same disparities as we have these conversations. And so again, I just want to thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to share with you, and I really want to commend you on the work that you are doing and that you continue to do in this space around digital equity.
Thank you so much, Pamela. I really appreciate you approaching digital equity with this faith-based lens. And I appreciate you focusing our attention to what tools our communities need to build the digitally equitable future we're envisioning here. I know our panelists worked today with that framework in mind as well, and I think it'll be a fantastic discussion. With that, let me bring our moderator for our panel today into the conversation, Kate Rivera. Kate is the Executive Director of the Technology Learning Collaborative in Philadelphia and serves as the Principal Consultant of Kate Rivera Solutions. The Technology Learning Collaborative is a digital equity coalition in Philadelphia, and its mission is to advance digital literacy, access, and inclusion dialogue by fostering professional collaboration, training, and networking among organizations and institutions dedicated to advancing these domains. Kate Rivera is also an independent consultant who offers support to nonprofits and other mission-driven organizations in areas such as project management, program and strategic planning, grant writing, and more. Her areas of expertise encompass digital inclusion, youth workforce development, and civic engagement. With that, I'm delighted to hand the reins over to Kate and excited to hear our panelists get into it.
Well, thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We have a really fantastic group of panelists here to share, and I know they have a lot of really fascinating and exciting work to talk about. So I'm going to just very quickly introduce them with their names and titles, and you can find their full bios online on the website for this webinar series. You can read more about their backgrounds. And so we have Rita Taylor, Strategic Advisor for Travis County in Texas, supporting the Broadband and Digital Equity Program. Brittany Woods Orison, Broadband Specialist, Alaska Public Interest Research Group. Lydia Flores, Early Childhood Program Manager for Long Beach Forward. And Matt Rantanen, Vice President, Tribal Broadband, Golden State Net, and Director of Technology, Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association, and Tribal Digital Village. So those are our panelists for today. I have a few questions for them, and then we will have a few minutes for questions from the audience at the end. So if you have questions that come up for you during the discussion, please drop them in the Q&A. And so I just wanted to start off by asking each of our panelists, just by way of introduction, to talk a little bit about your vision for digital equity work in your communities, and sharing specific examples of the tools and strategies that you've used to help shape the future of digital equity in your communities. And I think could be Brittany, if you want to start us off.
Zan Nazoon, hello. Anabase, thank you for having me here. I'm Brittany Woods Orison. I work for ACPERG and Native Movement as a broadband specialist. And when I was hired for this role, the goal was for me to focus on education, networking with who was in this world of digital equity, and focusing on policy. And as I've been in this work, my vision has come from growing up in community, growing up in the village without internet, being raised by elders, and with being blessed with my culture, and just wanting to give back. The goal I have with getting more internet in Alaska is for Alaskans to be able to live wherever they want and to be able to solve their own issues. Currently, with extremely slow services that barely can open emails and living in extreme areas either with isolation and weather. It's very difficult what Alaskan challenges there are, and people are still so committed to their homelands and to their community that they do so much with so little. And so I hope to be a part of Alaskans living their highest quality of life.
Thank you. Rita, if you could share a little bit about your work.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yep, Rita Taylor. I'm the Travis County Strategic Advisor, and I came into this role as a Fuse Corps Executive Fellow in 2022, and then went in-house to help finish the rest of our needs assessment, which was, we're still ongoing, as a large study in partnership with the city of Austin. So Travis County is in Central Texas, and the city of Austin is probably the largest city in our county. And we're partnering to try to better understand the needs that folks have around digital access. Central Texas and Austin specifically are seen as kind of like the Silicon Hills. There's why would there be an internet or digital access challenge in Austin? And indeed, we do have high internet subscription rates, but that doesn't mean that everyone has quality access to the internet. And it doesn't mean that just because there is internet there means that everyone has the skills and resources to access it. Austin is a very expensive city, and affordability is a challenge. And so when we talk about, and this is definitely a collective effort, when we talk about internet access and digital equity, we are really talking about affordable, reliable, high-speed internet for all. And so the person's identities, such as race, income, age, or abilities, and where they live, are not predictors of whether they have access to affordable, reliable, and quality internet, and the tools and skills needed to use the internet to achieve their goals. So that's kind of my role as a researcher, is kind of being able to support the participatory research project we've been up to.
Great. Lydia.
Yes, hello. So my name is Lydia Flores. I serve Long Beach, California, where the Long Beach Forward vision is that race and income do not determine one's future in Long Beach, where we want to build toward a community where everyone is safe, connected, and healthy. And in this increasingly virtual world, some communities are getting left behind, as has been said. And as my role as early childhood program manager, I work directly with lower income parents of color through a lot of different programs and projects throughout Best Start Central Long Beach. So we do have like bi-monthly meetings, community meetings. We also have projects that are designed and co-implemented with community leaders. And we have an entire participatory budgeting process where we can really get the community's input in identifying issues and their ideas on how to create solutions for them, whether, or like the first step solutions, since we only have funding for that year, but it's a start. And really what we try to do here is to get as many parents involved and engaged and comfortable in not only taking up that leadership position, but also start feeling comfortable with demanding more that they deserve as far as like digital equity goes. We know that parents, especially non-English speaking parents, lower income communities, it's a bit more difficult to be engaged in school board meetings and finding resources online to support their children, or really just connecting with the different things that are going on politically, because their presence online is so small. So there are definitely a lot of different ways that we have been challenging those systems in place and really preparing these parents to feel comfortable navigating those obstacles and advocate a little bit more around not only digital equity, but having access to everything across like with language justice. Because you can have access to things online, but if it's not in the language that people will need to read it, it's not very accessible. So there's a lot of different things that we're doing, working with community directly.
Wonderful. And then Matt.
Thank you. Well, my career is somewhat multifaceted, and I've been with the Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association. I'm in my 23rd year now, and in the beginning, it was funded by an outside grant opportunity, and the community had already been working together since the early 70s to strengthen their numbers in federal policy and local opportunities, regional opportunities. So they had a mechanism of communicating in the Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association. And they were pretty responsible in interacting when funding opportunities and things came in. But this was a little bit different and a little bit bigger. And we ended up getting, because it was so big and there was 19 reservations involved, different tribal nations. We had 2 representatives from each of those reservations, and they would attend in the beginning, it was monthly meetings, and then it went to quarterly meetings to identify the stakeholders in each of the communities and the needs of each of those stakeholders, times 19, and then at times doing presentations to those stakeholders in each of the communities, and so that the understanding of what the possibility was for building a network of resource center after school programs and connecting them to the internet, which 23 years ago, the internet looked a little bit different. So laying sort of the baseline of understanding of the technology out there, and then what the funding opportunity was, and then getting feedback and listening to all of those communities and all those community stakeholders, and then devising solutions together, not working on, not working with an approach of, oh, we know how to fix your problem, which is the sentence I hate the worst, right? So it is a process of engagement and sitting down and working with those stakeholders about what is needed. And so the evolution of, okay, we're going to build a network, we're going to connect tribal municipalities, and we're going to connect tribal homes. We thought, oh, if you build this network, everybody will come. But digital inclusion and digital equity, people need to take ownership in the process from the beginning to, continue ownership as a participant later. And we learned that through trial and error, and really understood over the long term the value of educating on platforms, and then understanding the needs of the individual community members right down to the house. So we are constantly engaged. We had been funded with a BTOP program fund through the RS stimulus. We did more of that recently. And then, there's a constant circular engagement with community as we deploy and expand that network in Southern California. The other parts of my career, I've been engaged in policy and sort of trying to understand how to bring policy back to the community in an understandable, graspable, palpable object, so that they can help me be better in the policy space. And then ultimately now I run what's called the Tribal Broadband Boot Camps, and that is really really informed the digital inclusion piece, the digital equity piece. We bring in an actual tribal navigator, Davida Del Mar, who's Navajo Dene, and she works at National Digital Inclusion Alliance. And we have the best half day out of a 3-day program of digital inclusion and digital equity with those people learning and building broadband networks. So it's kind of come full circle. It's a very much a constant learning process, an education process.
Great, thank you all so much. I already have so many questions I know we won't have time to get to. But so the Benton Institute for Broadband Society released its principles for digital equity earlier this year. And one of the themes that came from those principles is a focus on empowering communities. And as I'm sure our audience has already heard, it sounds like all of you in your own unique ways have really done a lot of work to focus what you're doing on empowering communities, working with the community, not coming in and telling the community what the solutions are, but working with communities to identify needs and solutions. And so I wanted to ask each of you to dive in a little bit more on that work and talk a little bit more about how you have made it work. Because it's not always, it's not always the easiest, right? It's a lot easier to come into community and say, we already know how to fix this. Here's your solution. And it's a lot more complicated. There's a lot more gray areas when you're, really taking the time to design participatory processes and make sure that you're empowering those communities and the people who are most affected. So if you could each talk a little bit more about how you work with the communities that you're working in terms of defining goals and visions, coming up with solutions, and also collecting data for and with the community to inform your work. Touch on any combination of those things. If I could ask Lydia to start us off, talk a little bit more about the participatory budgeting process and the co-designing of solutions in your work.
Absolutely. This is one of my favorite things to talk about ever. So Long Beach Forward has Best Start Central Long Beach, which is a First Five initiative under First Five LA, where the tobacco tax is kind of invested into lower income communities of color that can really benefit from additional programming for parents with young children. And in doing so, every year we have what we call community change funds, which can range anywhere between 150,000 to maybe 200,000. And those funds are used to create projects that are designed by the community. And all of these projects have to align with what we call the community change agenda, which is 4 specific priorities identified by these parents that they feel is the most pressing, the most urgent to parents. And in Best Start Central Long Beach, one of them is building parent skills on child development, on just general parenting skills, increasing access to quality and affordable housing, childcare, economic security, preventing child abuse and neglect. And so all of the projects that come out of Best Start Central Long Beach are all grounded in those community identified priorities. And since Best Start Central Long Beach has existed it's going on its 6th year now, we have had 4 cycles of a process for community members to be part of designing projects, and 3 of those were participatory budgeting. In each one of these, we've had anywhere between 150 to 200 parents, caregivers, local organizations, and just residents really identify those issues that are more specific to those 4 general buckets of priorities. And so there's like a few different months where a lot of people, we just get a lot of insight from parents, from childcare centers, from local school districts, from farmers markets that we are able to canvas, from homes, stores even. And in getting all this information and accruing this data, we're able to also invite those who volunteer those ideas to really be part of the project development process that follows that. So after we do the idea collection phase of getting all of this information on what the community really wants, we invite those folks to also be part of working together in project development teams to develop those broader ideas into like tangible project proposals with their own timelines, their own budgets, their anticipated outcomes. And the final projects they're actually voted on by the broader Best Start Central Long Beach community as well. So the community is involved from beginning to end. And after the community votes on it, those final proposals will have a fiscally sponsored organization that will really co-implement that project for the next program year, along with a group of community members. So in the 3 years that we've had, the 3 cycles of participatory budgeting that we've had, digital literacy has always been consistently an identified need. And the range of needs is pretty broad. It's from turning on a computer and opening a web browser to fully leading trainings and parent groups through Zoom. So there's a pretty broad need and desire there to learn a little bit more. And fortunately, I have the honor and privilege to, as part of Bessemer Central Long Beach and Long Beach Forward, to really facilitate every phase of this participatory budgeting process, which is like a year-long process, and also in facilitating those project development teams and like the co-planning and implementation of the winning projects that the community votes on. And the community leaders that lead these projects that are finally voted on and are implemented, they're community leaders, so they're parents, they're a lot of them have varying experience in project planning or leadership in general, in any leadership position. So it's a really amazing opportunity to really develop that leadership, develop that confidence, that familiarizing themselves with how a budget works, like what exactly is, how can we evaluate and create outcomes for a project? What does that look like on a day-to-day? And as I mentioned earlier, in holding bi-monthly community partnership meetings, where it's essentially like an interactive space with shared learning, guest speakers, project updates on those voted projects, and just community announcements. So those community partnership meetings is a really great opportunity to grow the partnership. So in doing that, get a more diverse voices across, just to know how we can respond to the needs of the community, but also get more ideas and like creativity in how to address those specifically, as well with digital equity, and also to develop more leaders. There's a lot of people that come in at various points in their leadership journey, and in creating those, in introducing the PB process to them, and introducing the projects that come out of it to them. It's a really just fantastic opportunity for people to see how they can be involved in the solutions that they want to see, to best support their families, their neighbors, their schools, and their community as a whole. And what I absolutely love about everything that we do in Bessemer Central Long Beach, not only from a higher level PB design process, not only in these the regular meetings that we have to engage with community, or even in the project development, but the participants that join these finished projects, we do our very best to prioritize accessibility. So the parents that are participating in these fully fledged projects, they are empowered to be as engaged as possible, because we offer childcare, we offer interpretation, lunch, dinner, and refreshments, stipends, and incentives, because we know this all takes time, and transportation support if needed. So it's a really, I work as holistically as possible, trying to make that experience and learning how to take up space and how to find the voice and how to refine it, gain confidence in all aspects of leadership, but also in participating in the solution, being part of the solution, being comfortable in demanding more from not only the small pot of funds that we get on a yearly basis, but with the school district, with public comment, with any civic engagement opportunities as well. So it's fascinating. It's really cool. I'm super proud to be part of it. But yeah, that's something that we've been doing, and we're actually going to continue doing until, you know, we talk about sustainability. These funds, people are smoking less, which is great, but that means funds are less to actually make these projects. So yeah, sustainability is something that is very important, that it's top of mind. But yeah, that's something that we're working on.
Thank you so much. I can see the joy in your face, and it's so great to see people doing work that's so meaningful. I know I'm taking notes over here. Sounds like a really great model. Rita, I'm going to ask you to weigh in on your work with empowering communities, and I know that you are going to share about the really great community informed data collection you're doing. So I'm also going to remind our audience about the importance of data collection and measurement, and that there are resources from Centri Tech Foundation and the Digital Equity Research Center with frameworks to measure and evaluate our work. And then, yeah, Rita, if you could talk a little bit about the work that you've been doing.
Yeah, thanks. So again, we've been doing a digital equity needs assessment for the past year, and working for government, we've definitely gotten a lot of feedback about trust and lack of trust for government, and completely understandably so. And so a lot of what we've done is spend time, one, building relationships early on in the project, even prior to a year ago. And we also tried to focus on understanding what resources are out there. Something we heard very early on was share resources. Don't just come and be extractive. And our strategy was participatory as well, to work with community members to design the research strategy and to conduct it as well. And then also to identify solutions from the data and interpret the data together. So we've done a number of different things. One, we built a resource guide, a 3-page resource guide that we've been able to kind of share out at every interaction point. Hopefully, we've worked on that. Every survey, folks also got a resource guide. And our outreach team went out during the surveys, which the survey was co-designed with a group in Austin called the Digital Empowerment Community of Austin. And I shouldn't say the group, members of the group, this is a loose network. And DECA has been around for almost a decade, I believe, and has been working towards digital equity and digital inclusion initiatives collectively and separately for a while, because the city of Austin's had a strategic plan, and it's the process of kind of revamping that plan. So a lot of what we're doing right now is collecting information and solutions that can then feed into that strategic plan. So again, it's a partnership between Travis County and the city of Austin. So we had that resource guide. We did surveys, and the team that went out and did the surveys in Spanish and English did it verbally, and then helped folks get connected to all those resources. So someone says they need a computer, let's get connected to this organization locally that does provide free devices, or get you connected to Digital Navigator, or someone can help you sign up for the Affordable Connectivity Program. Then after the data collection for the survey, the outreach team then spent months just helping folks sign up for ACP through a lot of the same networks that we used during the outreach period for the survey work. In the middle of all of that, we also hosted multiple community advisory workshops for folks to give input into the next phase of the study, which is more focus groups, qualitative community conversations. Again, trust came up, it's huge. So we really focused on kind of pivoting and shuffling and trying to rearrange budgets and how we could work with different organizations who are already trusted. And we built a nonprofit working group and 19 organizations, and we had weekly sprints in July, where we co-designed the focus group protocol, questions, strategy, conversations, and then they helped host the conversations as well. So then in August, we had the conversations. We then took all of that data from the survey, from the focus groups, made sure we were sharing it back with community members who participated in all of these, and as many folks as we could, in addition to sharing resources. So we went to resource fairs with the data. We went, and when I say data, I mean summaries of data. We went to resource fairs. We went to community events. We went to libraries. We also had 2 online sessions where folks could come in and not only help interpret that data with us and hear about it, but also then think about solutions. So we took a lot of the recommendations that came from the surveys and the focus groups and turned them into how might we statements. So about 9 or 10 how might we statements, and folks could directly provide their recommendations to those on stickies, or if we were having a virtual conversation, or we could document it for them, whatever's comfortable. And all of those are then being added to the final report. So we're building this larger report that will also have a lot of details about like what we learned about ACP, outreach strategies, additional resources and assets that we can share. It's been very much focused on trying to, and I think, Lydia, you're make an awesome point about leadership. One thing that we're hoping with this data and the outputs of the data, because we're not just going to produce one big report, it's going to have lots of different things, that folks can see themselves in the work and see themselves as, see these things as a tool to advocate, whether it's to go to their school district or go to a apartment complex owner, or just organizing in their neighborhood, or an organizational leader deciding, oh, I can shift these things. Like one thing we heard a lot about was power outlets and folks having challenges getting access to power their devices, and that being a huge issue for folks, especially if they have older tech, or if they like there's all kinds of things that prohibit people from being able to use like charge out in public. And we don't have a lot of public access internet in Travis County in the city of Boston. So we heard a lot of challenges, and folks can take that information. And we heard one person describe like go to their local coffee shop and say, hey, can we open up the outlets? So there's things people can do both with a big advocacy A and a smaller advocacy A, and in lots of different strategies. So one thing we're doing is trying to work with folks so that we aren't coming with solutions and we aren't by ourselves, and we are working with folks to identify those and then elevate them.
Thank you so much. Once again, I'm taking a lot of notes to bring back to my communities about these really incredible strategies. Brittany, I know you've already shared with us this really passionate vision you have for Alaskans who live where they want and solve their own problems. And I know that on the topic of data that you have that you work around storytelling and the power of stories. If you could talk a little bit about your work empowering communities and that storytelling aspect.
Yeah, people in Alaska, we're changing so fast, and like with digital equity, it starts with educating people on what they deserve and that ability to do that and have power over that. And what has helped me bring awareness to like how I go about the work is learning that even my own community of Duluth-Tenitz or Rampart, Alaska didn't have electricity until the 80s. And so I'm imagining my parents and grandparents growing up in that way. And then all of a sudden you're telling them like we have internet in our community. And even in these last few years, we have finally had people been able to connect, and they're just like, so it's a bizarre experience to go from like just getting electricity to getting phone service to getting to that. And what I hold myself responsible to, and having the ability to be in this work and to completely focus on it, and being part of two organizations. I'm one of the only people focused on this work, and we are also in a bigger group of organizations called the Just Transition Collective. And what I love, and the biggest pro in having people working on so many issue areas, is that when we all share about our work, we are collaborative, and we think about ways if we're going to go to community or we're going to ask people to get involved in this public engagement process, it's like, what can we bring to them? What are the resources? Can we talk about more than one thing at once? And a key thing too is simplifying the language and making it understandable, as everyone else is starting to say. And I'm working on this with the digital equity plan in Alaska. We're in the public comment period, and we're going to communities, and we're thinking like, what are the main things they need to take away? What do they need to know that's going to happen in the next few years, and what they need to expect, and what part of their story can we bring with them? And because there's such limited data in Alaska, and it's so expensive to travel, it's cheaper for me to go to Seattle or even New York than it is to fly within the state. And we're talking about like taking small cub planes and going on boats and four-wheelers. Like it's the wild west for real. And just like making the most. So when we ask for their trust and we ask for them to be part of this, we let them know like your story has impact in and how people understand Alaska. Because I went to DC for the first time this year, and sharing about my experiences, and this was something I experienced in college too, where when I told about my story and how I was raised without running water, and having like how my family hunted for traditional foods, and like the pure amazement that's seen. And so Alaska is behind in many ways, and like the lack of infrastructure, what people understand about digital equity, because we're educating people on using these terms. I have to go to people like, does anyone work on the internet? Do you know about internet issues? And starting at these very basic places And so it's trying to relate the work to people and having a collaboration, like, if you trust us with your stories, this is what we're trying to do on this project, and continue bringing in more people and letting them know that they deserve the internet and we are responsible as like a state and nation to doing this for our people.
Great. Yeah, that's thank you for sharing with us about that challenging and important work. Matt, I feel like you kind of kicked this conversation off by sharing in your intro about, not going into communities and saying we know how to fix your problems. So if you want to talk a little bit more about your work empowering communities and what that's meant for you.
Yeah, so yeah, that we know how to fix your problem is the Silicon Valley approach, and that's absolutely the wrong method. And so what you need to do when you work with a community, and you know this from being in your own communities, but you need to find the champions on the ground. And Brittany is the champion on the ground in Alaska. I met Brittany a couple years ago, and we've had plenty of opportunities to interact and engage in stuff, and I'm very impressed at the energy that she still possesses in the work that she does. But that's the same thing that happened in Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association. It typically happens around education. It's the lowest common denominator in the space. Like, kids need access to education. Teachers are pushing for that access to education and online resources. And engaging the youth, because they're the generation that's going to carry this past where you're starting with, right? So I'm an old guy now. I have gray hair. I'm 54, and I've been doing this in my 23rd year. And I am, I hate to say this, and I've said it before at the boot camps, but I'm a bit of an energy vampire. When people like Brittany come in and they're super excited and enthusiastic about what they're just starting out, I remember how I used to feel. And I thrive on that energy a little bit from the room, and it kind of revitalizes my drive. And I think it's really important. So in Southern California, we have 2 of the youth that participated in the earliest programs at the Tribal Digital Village Network. They had binoculars, GPSs, and hiking boots provided to them from the program. They went and a stipend, and they went around and found all the vantage points for towers to create a network from reservation to reservation. And one of those kids was 17 years old, and he is currently the senior field technician for the Tribal Digital Village, and he is the master of the network effectively. His name is Joseph Peralta, and he's 23 years later, he's carrying on this work, and the person that's running the day-to-day operations and working with Joseph to make plans to do that is Paul Miranda. And Paul was an understudy of mine when I first came to the project, and I was teaching tribes, sharing my experience in building community web portals and how to manage your online assets, outward facing and inward facing, and protect the sacred content versus the public content. And Paul was my shadow, and Paul is now running day-to-day operations at the Tribal Digital Village Network. So I can't reinforce enough that engaging youth, that next generation of leaders, in the process and including them in the planning and the actual functional pieces of the process, how important that is for a community to function and to grow. This dovetails into sustainability, whether you need sustainable dollars, but you also need sustainable people workforce. And it's one of the things in Indian country that we don't necessarily have a lot of people trained up in building and managing networks or doing computer IT or doing the technical field. And then the next generations are embracing these, because a lot of them are learning on technical platforms in school, where some of us were using typewriters, I included, as we heard in the beginning. I was fortunate enough to be at the Computer History Museum for a friend's birthday party last weekend in San Jose, and my first computer was there. Lucky my dad was a veterinarian and had access to some of these kind of things, but I had It was portable. It's the size of a Samsonite suitcase. So I was lucky enough to get access to that. And some of the kids and the teens in the early 20s are getting access to technology today, and they learn on that technology. And so there's been a real interesting paradigm shift in the cultural resistance to internet and access to the networks, to increasing access to network and increased bandwidth and support for the youth now in 23 years that have left and gone to higher education or vocational education in technology and aren't coming back home to the reservation because they can't perform what they just learned. They can't actually get a career where they could telecommute from home. And a lot of the youth that have gone to higher education end up working in a city and not coming back to the reservation, even though, you know, the majority of the companies today will allow a telecommute because they don't have that resource of broadband. And so it's really crucial to build your longevity plan, build your plan with the people that'll be using it generations from now. Thank you.
Well, that was the perfect segue into my final question. Although I certainly could spend another couple of hours geeking out about these community engagement strategies that you've all been talking about. But so to round out our discussion, I do want to talk a little bit about, or ask each of you to talk a little bit about the future and sustainability for this work. So it's another theme in the Benton Institute's Principles for Digital Equity, is the plan for sustainability. And it's a big part of the theme for this series, and very near and dear to my heart, having been through the round of BTOP funding about a decade ago, and wanting to see that that we use this new federal investment of funding to really plan long term for the future. So I'll open this up to the four panelists, whoever wants to jump in and talk a little bit about what strategies you're using to support longer term planning in your work, or ideas you may have gotten over the course of these conversations about those long-term sustainability planning. Any of you that want to jump in on that one?
I can start and say working on awareness and becoming a trusted organization for updates and strengthening this network. I'm on this digital equity plan. It's been really awesome. I email and share out, and they're asking how they can get it to their regions. And we're hoping to finalize it and creating a coalition and working collectively on digital equity together in Alaska. And the bigger frame for sustainability in Alaska is we cannot afford to not have internet anymore. What our healthcare systems are doing to take care of our own people and paying thousands of dollars for someone to come from remote Alaska. We've had to hire teachers from the Philippines because we couldn't even get people within our own nation to come educate our students. And teachers running down the hallway to tell people to get off the internet to do standardized testing. And what personally too, as an Alaska Native person, is seeing the extremely violent extractive projects happening in the state, and there's very many to name. And making it more personal, like on the Yukon River, we had a salmon collapse, and that's my people's traditional food. I never thought I would witness this. And we've had to rely on other regions to send us fish from theirs, and like having that network and doing that with expensive traveling or shipping, and then having limited communication at times. And so our people are working together, and we have like so many other industries and ways to bolster our economy and to do healthcare. And we're doing this without reliable internet. And so it's really intimidating and challenging, but every day I'm so hopeful by the people I work with and the vision we hold. And someone told me, you don't work towards a vision, you work from it. And so I live in my little happy place when I'm doing this work, and I see how much closer we're getting to doing this. And, this industry has been functioning the way it has been with privacy and behind closed doors. And so as more people are aware of this and empowered to voice what they're experiencing and do more to help to create the solution themselves, and doing that regionally and then as a state, I'm like pumped for this work every day. So that's my sustainability.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Truly, as Matt said, you're champion on the ground there. Thank you for sharing that. Other panelists have thoughts you want to weigh in on?
Yeah. So for Best Art Central Long Beach, there has been an idea of that couldn't really there wasn't the staff capacity to be able to actually follow through, but there was an idea of a community connectors promotora style train the trainers like project that was really cool, that really involved like high school students or college students, really whoever is in close proximity to or has already strong relationships with people that would really benefit from learning a lot of digital literacy skills, that they would get compensated. They would first receive the training that they would share with those folks, and if they're high school students, maybe that could also contribute to like the community service requirement that a lot of schools have. And maybe if we could like institutionalize that, like let that be a thing that we can make important and recognize throughout like school districts or the city. But there's this one project that we're currently working on now. It's focused on housing, but similar idea can be applied to digital equity, where it's another promotora project where we have like an interest form of folks that are interested in learning more about on housing, but to pivot to digital equity, it could be people who are interested in learning what the issues are, how the community can get involved, learning those skills of using a laptop, using Zoom, how to navigate certain websites if parents want to be more involved in their child's school, and compensating them for that as they're also connecting with the community over different like pop-up clinics throughout the year, so that we can continue building that momentum and continue sharing that knowledge, and also really help grow that leadership component, as well as people learn what the issue is, learn what the need is. They're able to be plugged into existing organizations or efforts that are really leading this, and have more people power to be able to demand more specific needs from whatever level of governments that we have, because as I mentioned earlier, the funding will run out. There's only so many things that we have at any given point in time, and right now the idea is to get as many people involved, and to really see like the scope of what the need is, and not only share that information of like this is what needs to happen, but tangibly and specifically share how the community can get involved at any point in time, within language appropriate ways, and get as engaged as possible. But there's only so many rough outlines of ideas, but I'm always interested in learning how this can also be made more sustainable and get more traction and everything.
Absolutely. I'm gonna take moderator privilege for a second and just say that I'll put a plug in for coalitions and coalition building. I know my colleague Juliet Fink Yates talked a little bit about this in the first webinar of this series, but in Philadelphia, after the BTOP funding ended, we had a number of organizations who had been collaborating just to continue collaborating and building a coalition really with no funding and not a lot of resources, but still a way to continue to collaborate and kind of keep a network of knowledge alive. So it's one strategy I'll share with everyone. And Matt, you have some thoughts to add?
I was gonna offer it Rita to go next, and I'll back clean up.
All right. Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I think that part of what we've been thinking about too is how to spread the assumption of who is responsible so that everyone can see themselves as playing a role in this. I don't necessarily know all of the ways that different people can have influence, and our project certainly doesn't have enough insight to gather that. But what people can do is see themselves individually, the power they have to influence, and the organizations they're connected to. So we've done a couple of different things to varying degrees of success. We work with existing coalitions. We've made an effort to make sure we're connected to different groups that are themselves coalitions on different topics. And then also we have organized a regional, because there's no way this is just essentially like a small county, city issue. How can we build relationships with our whole Central Texas 10-county region and beyond? So we've been doing a lot of work as well to just get connected and share what we learn, and then also make sure we're listening and brainstorm together. And then the hope is the research and the work that other people are doing, because there's so many people invested in this work, if they can get more connected to the coalitions, to the networks that are building, and the coalitions can get connected to each other, that kind of like it'll spread further. And it may not even be something that can directly be tied back. It might just be ripple effect. But the goal is sustainability that may not even look like a structured sustainability, because there's so many different ways people can engage and change what's happening today.
Absolutely.
So I'll close up with, rewind 20 years ago, and the federal government and state governments, for that matter, when they granted funds, they were often siloed, right? And you had to operate within the silo. You weren't allowed to intermix other grant funds with those things to get a better result. We've done a lot of work, especially from the tribal communities, to break down those silos at federal government, to be able to use funding from one agency and funding from another agency to get the same, or, to build a better outcome for one goal. And I think that needs to be translated into community, right? So you're going to build broadband, and you're going to connect everybody to broadband because it is the 21st century tool that everybody needs to be a participant in society, get access to the resources that you need to live. And you have to understand that may have to be subsidized by something else that you do in your community, right? Your economic development project over here might have to kick some dollars to your network to make sure it lives. One of the things that happens at Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association is that those leaders have the understanding that, look, this internet is so important, we don't want it to go away. So let's strip overhead out of the process of running that network, and let's make sure that, Matt wears two hats and he can get paid out of the other hat, but run the network, and that Paul gets paid out of another program. We have responsibilities to those programs, and we do that work as well. But it allows the network to not have an overhead that can't sustain. So we have a subscription base, fee-based service to the tribal homes, but we try to be competitive and ever growing the capacity, but not growing the amount of money it costs. But we're trying to bring in rent, if you will, so that we can cover certain things. And then I think the innovation of new minds and new thinkers coming into this space. It's why I've started doing the tribal broadband boot camps. There's no way I could work for 23 years in an industry and make 7,000 mistakes and not share the few solutions that we've come up with over the years that actually worked well. So in workforce development and planning for the future, the sustainability of Native Americans, Alaska Natives, and Hawaiians, and our brothers and sisters in First Nations Canada, that sharing that information and sharing that wealth is growing a community of Indigenous folks that are building their own solutions and now relying on each other for information and not industry, and not me. I get out of the way. And there's a community of folks now, upwards of 300 people that have attended these boot camps, that now, they have this network where, hey, I'm going to use this product. Anybody have experience? Hey, I want to use this contractor. Are they good or not? Hey, who has a boilerplate contract form I can use for this? And so I think that is the long-term sustainability for the entire space that I've been thinking of as a bigger grand vision, is more people communicating, not in silos, working together. Even though they're not working on the same project, they are working together to raise the bar across Indian country for communications.
Thank you so much. We are almost at time, but we did just have one question come in the Q&A around kind of building coalitions and doing outreach. And this person's sharing that folks are overworked and exhausted and don't always have the time and energy for this work or getting involved in this work, even though they know it's important. So just very quickly before we wrap up, any words of advice about how you overcome that, how volunteer efforts rely so much on volunteers who are overworked and overwhelmed.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in quick and say that I haven't figured out how to replicate myself, and I'm not probably going to pull that off. So sharing the information with more people and getting more people enthusiastic, so there's more of us doing it, not all relying on one of us here and one of us in Alaska. And you know what I mean? It has to be more people. It has to be an effort from way more people.
Absolutely.
There's like so many ways to go about doing this work, and I have so many ideas and projects I have in the queue. Right now, a lot of my work where I'm able to do a lot of work on people's behalf and like collect stories and do every action so people can submit comments, and that has been like the most valuable thing, and getting as many people involved with the low lift. And as we're building that community, I'm envisioning like bringing more resources here and different like I want more digital literacy, and I want electronic refurbisher and more recycling for all this. And so my advice is just like, you can keep working on things, and what is the most fruitful will reveal itself, and you can hold on to those other ideas, and it will reveal to itself when it's the right time to like go after it. That's been my experience.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. This has been really inspirational for me. And I think Matt kind of referenced this earlier, like sometimes you do this work for a while and you start to get tired, and then you meet people who have all this energy and passion and new ideas, and it's reinvigorating for sure. So maybe that's a piece of advice as well. Well, I'm going to hand things back off to our hosts to give some closing remarks. But thank you all so much for your time.
Hi everyone. I guess I'll just get it started while we're joining back on in the last 2 minutes, just to say a huge thank you to everyone. Thank you so much to all of our speakers who have joined us over the last 3 days. This has been an unbelievable and incredibly important conversation that I really do hope that we'll take very seriously to heart in this work in the years ahead. There's so many lessons learned that in a minute there's not enough time to recap them all, but I just want to say thank you before turning them over to my colleagues Marta and Revati for helping to support this incredible series.
Thank you, Colin. And just to echo that was a fabulous conversation and fascinating. And I want to bottle all that energy. It is just so wonderful, because to that last question, very real. Folks are doing a lot these days, perhaps more so than they were 3 to 4 years ago. And it's a lot to move people. And so when you have this kind of energy and enthusiasm and really heartfelt dedication to the work, it does help people overcome that. I just want to dive in. There's just so many themes that, today's conversation punctuated what we heard over the last 2 days. And I think, ending with this look at the future really was just kind of carries forward that theme about collaboration, about communities working together, about centering community voice. I loved Juliet saying lift all boats, that like maybe the funds aren't going to go to all the places, but they're going to go somewhere. And can we come together and be strategic in thinking about how the funds are allocated and put to use in ways that help everyone progress and move forward? And I think all of you all touched on that, how to center community to arrive at solutions and to work in coalition and cross-sectoral partnerships. I think that was one very resounding point. I'm going to let Revati jump in here with observations as well.
Just to echo everything that Colin and Marta have already said, this is such a fantastic conversation today and the last few days. Thank you so much for everyone joining, and thank you for our panelists and our speakers and our moderators for doing such a great job. I am also thinking a lot about sort of the critical importance of community engagement, but as our panelists today and the question today pointed out, the difficulties of it, and I so appreciated the very sort of at one level incredibly visionary thinking about generational shifts, but also the really tactical, how do you talk to people, how do you engage people, how do you bring people to the table, or recognize that the community is the table and how we must all come around the same table. And it's just been a fantastic few days. Thank you so much.
One more thing I'd love to jump in to say is Jordana is really calling our attention to the financing of solutions, that when you do the work of cross-sectoral collaboration and you bring stakeholders around, a shared vision and shared goals, to really be intentional about thinking about how you will build that capital stack, and how it's not just federal funds, or even just the IIJA dollars, that there are other sources, both public and private, to complete that. But the underlining message I think she left us with was this notion of what we're after here is diversifying the ownership of digital assets in the digital economy in our communities. And I think that was really powerful to hear from her as well.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Marta and Revati. So I think with that, we can close this amazing series. All of these videos will be available online after the event. And again, we're just so grateful for everybody's time and participation, and we hope you are as inspired as we are. So everyone, please take care, and hopefully we will see you soon. Bye-bye.